Probably shouldn't be singing the tune in the video.
Hi there, how's things? Today I'm going to talk you through how I made my Halloween decorations last year. So I love Halloween, and we have a window that we put a display in every year at the front of the house. And my husband gave me the idea last year of doing a Little Shop of Horrors theme. So I wanted to keep things to a pretty low budget. Tried to use things that I already had. I didn't really want to be buying anything new. And also I wanted to make it last. I wanted to be able to use it again this year, but I mean, if it didn't last, then it wasn't going to have cost me too much to make. So after some little ideas, we decided to make some Audrey 2 inspired carnivorous plants. Now, the idea was to stick these into existing houseplants that we already had in our front window. And I already wanted to make sure that these were 3 separate sizes, so that we could give the illusion of her growing very quickly over the month of October. So this was the smallest one. We then had a medium-sized one and a really large one that took up quite a large amount of the window. It was super fun to make, and it was really fun to have them in the window as well, and see how long our neighbours and neighbours' kids in particular would notice these carnivorous plants in the window, and notice them growing and kind of keep looking out for them. So yeah, it was really fun. I really enjoyed making them, and I'm here to show you how to make your very own ones as well. A little shout out to my nephew as well, who's kind of inspired me to do this video. He didn't believe that I had made these myself, and I'm just here to tell you that you can make them for yourselves too. So let's get to it.
The first thing I did was draw up a design. I knew I wanted this decoration to look like it was growing from a plant pot, so needed a way to secure it in the soil. The head would be made out of 2 pieces for the top jaw and the bottom jaw. I would secure these 2 pieces together later to create the whole head. Taking inspiration from the design of Audrey 2 in Little Shop of Horrors, I knew I wanted to add these details around the mouth that would emphasise it. So I wanted large lips and a lot of sharp teeth to make it look scary. The movie design also has tendrils and vein details on the plant, so I wanted to make sure that I used this as inspiration as well. To emphasise the focus around the mouth, I wanted to add this 3-dimensional tongue that would be hanging out and looking gross and threatening. As this is meant to be a carnivorous plant, I knew I needed to add leaf details along the stem, and also something behind the head to try and hide any of the untidiness back there, and also make it blend in a little better with the houseplant I would be sticking it into. I'd probably have to use several pieces so that they overlapped and looked a little more natural. So now we have our design, let's get to materials. So keeping in mind we want to keep the budget low, I started with cardboard. Craft card would also be very useful, and it didn't matter what colour because I'd be painting over it. Newspaper would be used to stuff out the stem. I think the thing I used the most was toilet paper. This I used to create like a papier-mâché style layer on everything. So we also need some PVA glue. We need a way to secure our plant into the soil, so a couple of skewers will do the job. I found this pipe insulation that I thought I could use for the stem, but you could also use a kitchen roll tube or a toilet roll tube. We're definitely going to need some tape. I used parcel tape, but masking tape would have probably been better. And we're going to need a glue gun to add those vein details. We'll also be using the glue gun to secure everything, so make sure you've got a couple of spare glue sticks. I used acrylic paints to paint the details, so we're going to need some water and water to mix with the PVA glue to make our papier-mâché mixture. We'll be using a selection of paintbrushes in different sizes. Now, I used air dry clay to make the teeth. This gave them more of a 3-dimensional look, but you could always use cardboard. I also used floristry wire to create those bends in the tongue and the leaves. We will also need some scissors. And to add a base layer on everything, I used spray paint. Now we've gathered all our materials, let's start making. Alright, first we're going to start by drawing a circle onto our cardboard. And in the circle is a triangle. We're going to cut these out, and this is going to be 1/2 of the head. Next, we're going to try and shape this so that these two pieces here connect. We want to kind of round it out a little bit. Once we're happy with the shape, we can secure it with some tape on the inside and the outside. Do the same again, slightly bigger, and you'll have the top and bottom part of the head. We're going to use these head pieces as a template to make the gums. So we draw around the outside and on the inside of roughly where you want the gum pieces to meet, and cut it slightly smaller so it fits just inset. I like to round the pieces out a little bit. This means it's going to be easier to add detail and paint around them. It's not going to look quite so sharp and it will look more natural. Double check your measurement in the place you want it to be, and don't forget to label it for the top and the bottom. Using a hot glue gun, I'm going to add vein details on the top and the bottom of the head. I use some of the scrap cardboard to make the tongue. I make it extra long so we can bend it into shape in the mouth. This is where I use some of the floristry wire. I use hot glue to secure it in place just down the centre of the tongue, and secure it with my scissors so I'm not touching the hot glue. Cut off any excess wire and leave it to one side. Next, we're going to construct the stem. Here you take your tubing and your skewers or doweling and some newspaper. We're going to need to secure the skewers to the inside of the tube. I just use hot glue here, which seems to do the trick. We're going to stuff the inside of the tube and make sure we fill it out. Then we're going to secure it with more hot glue. Make sure that all of your seals are properly secure, as this is going to be the sturdy base for the rest of our plant. We're going to do our first layer of papier-mâché. I took a mixture of water and PVA glue and strips of tissue paper or toilet paper and just put a layer over both parts of the mouth, inside and out, and the stem and the tongue. As these are all very damp now, we're going to leave them to dry overnight. Next, I want to make the teeth. I'm using air dry clay and taking small pieces. I roll them into a ball. I then flatten one side and pinch the other and make these fang type shapes. I think I make about 10 per jaw. Taking our now dry pieces of the head, we're going to create the lips using a piece of rolled up newspaper and securing it with hot glue. I then use the papier-mâché method to secure this into place and make it blend better with the top and the bottom of the mouth. I had to do this a couple of times to ensure the blend between the lip and the rest of the head. I'm adding hot glue details onto the stem here, which we will cover with papier-mâché when that's dried, and another layer of papier-mâché over the tongue to make it super strong. We place these to one side and leave them to dry. I'm going to be securing the teeth onto the gum parts of the mouth now. Now, I tried to do these kind of symmetrical, but it doesn't matter if they're slightly off. That kind of adds a bit of character. And now they're ready to go in the mouth. Once your head pieces are completely dry, just double check that the gums fit and then secure with hot glue. And you guessed it, we're doing another layer of papier-mâché. We're doing this to blend the gum part with the rest of the mouth. Now you want to go around each tooth. This can be a little bit fiddly, but it will be totally worth it when it looks like that tooth is really sat in the gum. Place those pieces to one side to dry while we move on to doing the leaves. These are the sepals that will be at the back of the head. Now I've done it in 3 separate pieces here, and I'm using wire to create a skeleton which will help me bend them into shape later. We're going to put papier-mâché over these as well so that they have the same texture as the rest of the head. Once you've done one side, leave them to dry and then do the reverse side as well. We're going to do 2 little leaves which will be on the stem of the plant. We're going to use the same technique as the sepals, using the wire and the papier-mâché. While we leave those pieces to one side to dry, we're going to start doing our base layer on the tongue and the inside of the mouths. We're just using a plain red here, and we're going around all those little teeth. Don't worry too much if you get paint on the teeth, we'll be painting over those later. Once these are painted, put them to one side to dry. Once those pieces are dry, we're going to start adding some details. Now I'm using a technique called dry brushing here. This is where you remove most of the paint off the paintbrush and only use a very fine layer to go over your pieces. This picks out all the little details and textures in your pieces and adds a bit of depth to everything. So we're doing this on the tongue and the insides of the mouth. After this, we're then going to do it with the pink and then highlight with the white. I sometimes like to use a piece of tissue or even my finger to just kind of smudge it into the areas that I want it to be, or to help remove excess paint if I've put on too much. I'd like the tongue to stand out from the rest of the mouth, so I'm going to mix a darker red here and just go around the edges of the tongue and down the vein in the middle, just to pick out those details and hopefully make it stand out. We're going to tidy up the teeth now, as we have made a bit of a mess with the red. We're going around each individual one, just covering it with a bit of white acrylic paint. They should really pop against the red of the interior of the mouth now. The good thing about dry brushing is it really doesn't take long to dry, so we're now going to add the white highlights to everything. To do this, just a little bit of white paint on your paintbrush and go around each bit of the tongue and the inside of the mouth. You can use your finger to rub it in and just highlight and pick out those points in the mouth that you want. I'm using plain PVA glue here to add a layer onto our tongue. Now when this dries, it will be slightly shiny and give the tongue a wet look. Now comes the tricky part. We need to attach the top and the bottom jaw together. Using these strips of cardboard, I attach them to one side of the jaw and then glue them in place with hot glue and attach the bottom jaw. We then secure the cardboard tabs onto the other side and cut off any excess. To blend this in with the rest of the head, we're going to cover with papier-mâché as well. Now this should be the extra secure layer to make sure that these two pieces stay together. This should then be left to one side to dry. Once dry, we're going to attach the stem. I'm going to make some incisions in the tube, bend them back, and then using hot glue, secure it to the back of the head. Now with the tabs, there should be one just under the jaw and then a couple at the back. Because this particular piece of tubing is quite thick, I'm going to need to cut off some excess just to round it out. And then, you guessed it, we're also going to papier-mâché over this. This should create a super secure connection between the stem and the head, and this should also be left to one side to dry fully. Now that all of our pieces are fully dried, we get to the fun part, which is painting. We're going to do a base layer using the spray paint on all of our leaves and also on our actual plant. Now we're going to need to block out what we've already painted so we don't need to go back and repaint it. I'm using parcel tape here, which was probably not the best idea. You could probably find something else to use, but it did manage to do the job. Painting everything in the same base layer will mean that they're more cohesive and they will look like they belong together instead of standing out from each other. Once every little piece is covered for your base layer, you can remove the tape from the mouth and we can get on to the detail. I wanted to do the design for this one a little bit different to the original one I did for the last Halloween. I wanted to give it more of a cartoony look, so I went with these really bright pink lips. This is definitely the flamboyant cousin to my spooky one from last year. Once I did a good thick layer of paint on this, I put it to one side to dry. We're going to put a dry brush layer of green over all the leaves now, and particularly highlighting the veins. Now, I've just used green as a typical plant colour here, but you could use any colour you like. You could do any variation of colours. I've made my original one very dark because the base layer was actually black and I wanted it to be a bit more spooky, but because this is more cartoony, I'm going with quite vibrant colours. And I'm going to do the same dry brushing technique on the main body and the head of the plant as well. This just picks out all the textures and details that we've put in here, and it just makes it look more three-dimensional and interesting. I would suggest using different shades of the same colour to give it that different variation and make it look more like a natural plant. They're not always just one colour and they pick up light differently, so having several layers of different colours makes it look much better. I'm just going to touch up the areas around the mouth where there may have been a little bit of splash from the spray paint when we did the body. So every time you do use a different colour, do make sure you go over all the pieces that are those same colours. This means that they will blend in better with each other and make sure that they look more cohesive. You also don't want to forget to do the back of the leaves as well, as some parts of it may be seen. Just keep adding those layers of colour until you're happy with the outcome. I'm using a standout colour to highlight the veins on the top of the head here, and I'll also be using this same colour to highlight the veins down the stem. Now this is just to pick them out and to really exaggerate them so that we can see them from a distance. Using the same colour to highlight the veins on the leaves as well. I've made a very watery pink colour here, and I'm going to go around the base of each tooth just to make them slightly less bright white, but also to make them look like they are sitting in that gum area. I felt like the colour I had put on these leaves and on the body of the plant was just a bit too bright for my liking. So I did mix a bit of a darker green and go over all of the leaves and the body again, using a bit of a tissue just to take off the excess so that you could still see the lighter green coming through. But this just kind of toned down the bright greenness of it. Now we've made the plant darker, I felt like the lips needed brightening up a little bit so they would stand out more. So I just went over the lips with another layer of the pink. Once all the pieces have dried, we're going to glue all the bits together to complete our plant. First step is to place the tongue in the mouth. Now this is the trickiest bit because it's difficult to get to. We're probably going to need a pair of scissors to help us place the base of the tongue in the right place at the back of the mouth, but just use a bit of hot glue, quite a bit, because it will need to be held there and stick, and then place your tongue as far back in the mouth as you possibly can. Try and firm in with your finger if you can reach, but if not, then just try and hold it there, or use a pair of scissors to place pressure on the back so it will hold. Now to put the leaves in place, we're going to slightly shape these before we glue them in place. Doesn't really matter what shape, as we can always move them again afterwards. But these two that will mirror each other, I like to try and make them look the same. We're going to put quite a bit of hot glue on this and then place it in the position on the back of the head that we want it to sit. Now make sure you leave enough room on the other side for the other leaf as well, and roughly see where it will sit. Now you're going to have to hold this in place until the glue sets. Try not to move it too much, because I ended up doing this and then had to redo it over and over again a couple of times. Do the same for the other side and make sure that they kind of are in line with each other. Now to place the big back leaf over this as well. You want them to be overlapping slightly, so make sure you secure it over both of the back leaves. Put plenty of glue on there because this is the last bit to go on the back, and you want to make sure that it is secure. Now for the two little stem leaves, you're going to want to do the same thing. Bend them slightly at the base and then put glue on the bottom part and then place them on the stem. I place them opposite each other, which is just the way that I did it last time, but you could always do them so that they're slightly asymmetrical, or if you have multiple leaves you could put them in any variation that you like. Once all your leaves are in place, you can start to bend and adjust them, but do be careful, as if the glue hasn't set or if it's set too early, they may come off, so just try and re-glue them back in place. You can always glue some of the leaf down as well. I've done it here with the leaves, just to bring them closer around the head. Now, you don't have to do this, but I feel like it looked a little bit better just bringing them in that bit closer. Now, let's see her in all her glory.
finished. She's currently sat in my peace lily plant here, which I think she blends quite well with, and I enjoyed making it again. It was easier this time round now that I know the process that I had to go through, but I do feel like maybe I wasn't quite as detailed with the paintwork here compared to my other one, but this was just a step-by-step guide to go through it again, so she didn't need to be as detailed this time. You can obviously paint to your preference. It doesn't need to be green like I've done it. You could do it any colour you like, and I would love to hear from you if you've followed this video. Let me know in the comments section below, and if you'd like to stick around for more videos in the future, please like and subscribe. Thanks a mil. We'll see you next time.